Watch this.
The amount Idaho's proposed school choice program will cost the state has already been pumped up beyond double its original intent. And if that seems like a lot, wait till you see what it could cost beyond the first year. We all make mistakes, some bigger than others, like the ones that land us in jail. Well, that one is on your permanent record forever. But what if it wasn't? That's what the Clean Slate Act is proposing. Supporting local businesses is something we could probably all be a little bit better about doing. And when it comes to supporting Black-owned local businesses in Idaho, yeah, that's something we could definitely improve on this month and every other one, too.
We've got between 15 and 17, 18,000 private school students. We don't even know how many homeschool students we have. But if you take just those private school students, that's about $100 million. And that's where we're going.
$100 million. That's where we're going? When we spoke with Rod Grammer, the president and CEO of Idaho Business for Education, 3 weeks ago about the newly proposed education savings account bill in the Senate, he believed $100 million was an astronomical financial leap the program would take after that first year. Back then, the bill sponsors were asking for just under $6,000 per student in the program, which they said was about $20 million to start. That's what they needed. Since then, they've bumped it up to about $45 million. But based on where Idaho's Center for Fiscal Policy sees it going, well, Mr. Grammer might be grateful with just $100 million costing the state. The Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy does pretty much what the name implies. They're an independent, nonprofit, nonpartisan organization whose mission is to provide accurate financial analysis to inform public decisions. Basically, anytime the legislature is looking at what looks to be a big-ticket budget item, they take a nonpartisan look at it by way of the numbers, beyond what it may say in the bill. And according to the center's director, those numbers may be just digits, but they aren't indifferent.
As a state, we invest in the things that we value, right? So numbers aren't always like, cold and hard facts. They really are an expression of the kinds of investments we want to make as a community and the kinds of things we prioritize. So when we came across Senate Bill 1038, which would create essentially a publicly funded private school program, we did see an estimate for the first year of the bill, but we didn't see anything beyond that. So that's really where our team stepped in.
And she's right. That first year, the bill's fiscal note asks for $45 million to move from the state general fund into the education savings account program to pay for about 6,600 students. So when the Idaho Center for Fiscal Policy projected for the second year and beyond, well, that $45 million seemed like a minuscule clank in the coffer.
And what we found when we took a look at that was that costs from this program would increase dramatically from $44 million approximately in the first year to upwards of $360 million in the second year, or when the program was more fully implemented.
That's a big jump.
It is quite big, and decision makers always want to know what are the fiscal impacts, because at the end of the day, we have to set a budget for the state. We have to say, we're going to invest in this or that. $45
million to $363 million. Mm-hmm. That's like an 800% increase.
It is.
Did that shock you?
We had been familiar with and had been monitoring some of the other universal voucher programs in other states. So from what we've seen in similar universal voucher programs in Arizona and in Florida, those second and third years is the years when implementation really, starts to take off. And because the program is designed to be universal, that means that it should be eligible to all students. So, applying those uptake rates in those different populations leads us to this growing cost. So certainly when we look at something like a universal voucher program, the inherent question is how do we provide education, and how do we provide an education that makes sure that it's a good quality, that the vast majority of students can take advantage of good quality, and that we have results.
And the answer is?
We're not seeing the kinds of impacts down the road that we do see with other options like public schools. Some of the data tell us that performance for students isn't isn't expected to be much higher after enacting a universal voucher program. A lot of students still have access issues because they have particular educational needs that that private schools aren't required to address. Families of modest means would not still be able to access any of the private schooling based on the cost still being out of reach. I think for those factors, the investment, which is considerable, of upwards of $360 million, may not make sense.
As you heard, the Center for Fiscal Policy looked at Florida's and Arizona's ESA programs. Arizona's, by the way, is what Idaho's program is based on. And what the center also found with Arizona's program, about 45% of those enrolled came from an area where the median household income is more than $80,000 a year. Less than a third came from areas where the income is below $61,000 a year, which is the median income for the entire state, showing how the program primarily benefits wealthier families, they say. We tried to ask the sponsors of Senate Bill 1038, that would be Republican Senators Tammy Nichols and Brian Lenny, about this analysis, but our email went unanswered. And one of the questions we would have likely liked to have asked them, do their kids attend a public or private school? Would your family benefit from this public money for private education? Same questions we get from you when it comes to this stuff. Like just yesterday, Callie asked, do legislative rules require legislators to recuse themselves if they personally benefit from legislation? For example, she says, ESA voucher bill. Certain legislators would personally benefit with 4 to 6 children. They are homeschooling. 6,000 times 5, that's about $30,000. What a bonus, right? Well, the answer, Callie, is yes. Legislators do have to disclose if they have a conflict of interest in any legislation. But that doesn't mean they can't vote on it. On the Senate side, they have what is called Rule 39. And on the House side, it's called Rule 80, which says if a member's personal interest in the issue under consideration conflicts with the public's interest, the member's legislative activities can be subject to limitations, unless such conflicts are disclosed to the presiding officer or to the body. Upon disclosure of any such conflict, the member may vote upon any question or issue to which the conflict relates, unless the member requests to be excused. So basically, both the House and the Senate, they have these rules that are disclaimers, and members can still vote on legislation that could be seen as a conflict of interest as long as they just make it known. They say so. Because after all, they're supposed to be doing what's best for their constituents, right? Well, the only time members don't vote is if they request to be excused, which we're told is very rare. Do people deserve a second chance, an opportunity to have their checkered past wiped clean and not being held against them? That will be the question for lawmakers when House Bill 149 ends up in front of them. It's intended to seal certain court records so minor offenses aren't hanging over their heads when they no longer need to be. How far can the Clean Slate Act go? Here's Joe Paris.
Lawmakers in the Idaho House will soon get to debate a major question. Should Idahoans with a low-level offense have the opportunity to have their slate cleaned? A group of lawmakers say yes.
The current legislation creates a path, which there is not in Idaho right now, for people with relatively minor, nonviolent, non-sexual offenses to petition to seal their record.
House Minority Leader, Democrat Alana Rubel, is co-sponsoring the idea with Republican lawmakers, Representative Clay Handy and Senator Dave Lent. Rubel points out, there are a lot of consequences for people with convictions long after they serve their time and sentence.
Collateral consequences, which is all the other things that happen to you. The fact that now you can't get a job, you can't get a license to do this, that, or the other. You can no longer be a foster parent. You can't adopt. You can't get into medical school. There's a million things that happen to you. Actually, technically, there are over 45,000 things that happen to you. Somebody documented this. All of the collateral consequences that face you in America when you have something on your record.
So the idea, remove minor conviction from public-facing records for Idahoans with a relatively minor, nonviolent, and non-sexual offense on basically the misdemeanor level. Qualifying offenders would apply to the court for a clean slate 5 years after the completion of a sentence, including probation, without any subsequent offenses. Rubel says she worked with major stakeholders to create a list of minor offenses that would qualify for this one-time opportunity.
The prosecutors wanted it to be very, very limited. So they wanted a very short list of offenses for which so to be clear, this is not for rapists and murderers. This is for, the offenses on this would be, one-time low-level marijuana possession at most, really. Some of it is like littering, passing a school bus. It's pretty minor stuff. disturbing the peace, minor in possession of alcohol. So if you're busted with a beer at a party when you're 19, offenses like that. So these are very low risk offenses.
42 other states have clean slate programs similar to this concept. But to be clear, Idaho's would be for one single instance of minor crime, not an entire history of minor offenses.
So it's either a single offense or it can be multiple offenses if they're connected with the same incident. So let's say, you're a teenager in college at a party and it's the same party, but you get charged both with, disturbing the peace for having too much loud music and for holding a beer while you're underage. Both of those would be sealable because they arose from the same incident.
This proposal doesn't act as a pardon or a full cleanse of records. It simply removes a conviction or record from public view, promoting the idea of getting a job or housing.
That's an important distinction. So some people refer to it as expungement. It's not expungement. Expungement is when it's completely wiped off the face of the earth. This just means sealing. So it will still be in law enforcement databases. Police will still be able to see it. And if you reoffend, that first offense will come back to haunt you, and your subsequent offense will then be treated as a second offense, and you will get the heightened penalties that come with the second offense. So it's not completely wiped out, but it will largely be concealed from public view for purposes of job hunts and housing hunts and whatnot.
So there you go, Brian, a big idea.
Okay, so who would be opposed to something like this?
So far right now at the State House this session in committee, really, from people I've been talking to, no one's really come out and said, we're really against this. We don't want to see this pass. This is still early in the process. Yeah. It did pass out of the House committee. It will now go to the full House over the next few days, likely. It is interesting, though, when I'm talking with Minority Leader Rubel, there are some things that she'd like to see improved on this bill if it does become law, and just some of the things like an automatic system. So this would be a system where you would have to apply to the court to say, I would like to have this specific record sealed from public view, and they could deny that. In other states, though, there is actually an automatic system where if you have for 5 years or 3 years, depending on the state, after that point, it'll roll over, and that one time, that one little minor conviction, it goes away automatically. But this one is an opt-in system. There's a lot of control on it. Some other things that lawmakers might consider in the future if this does eventually pass, shortening that wait time. Again, here in Idaho, it's 5 years. Rubel told me that she would have liked to see 3, but the compromise is 5. But we will find out over the next few days what this looks like.
A couple more steps to go.
Oh, yeah.
Thanks, Joe. When was the last time you consciously made an effort to support a business for a specific reason other than, say, cost of a product, whether it be a local business or a small business? Well, it is Black History Month, and Black business leaders say their Idaho owners, they need support just like any other. Data from Pew Research Center shows Black people own 3% of American businesses. This was 2020 data. It's a pretty small number, considering, well, they're a group that makes up 12% of the country. And we don't even know what it looks like in Idaho, since the Gem State is among a handful that didn't contribute any data to this study. But we do know Black-owned Idaho businesses are a tight-knit community. Historically, they're only made possible by support, right? And they only exist today because of that same continued support. Here's Andrew Bartline.
It can be tough to keep the lights on at any business.
Yeah, it is. It can be.
It can be.
Trish Walker
So,
pins it down to one word:
we all need support, 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 support.
a lesson learned from a life lived.
I'm a fifth-generation Idahoan. I lived in the redlining district, but I didn't know that I was considered a poor individual or I lived on the wrong side of the tracks or anything, because I had so much support. I had my great-grandparents and I had my grandparents, and there was nobody in our community that ever went hungry. We never went without.
The support given to Trish, she now gives to others.
I do. I love it. I love every day.
That's because every day,
I am the CEO and founder.
Trish goes to work with a purpose: to support Black-owned Idaho businesses. Why did you decide this is an organization that needs founding in the first place?
I wanted to do more for my community and more for the Black community in Idaho, and business just made sense.
And it made even more sense when Trish learned about the demand. Expecting 30 to 40 businesses to sign on, she now supports around 200.
Some of them aren't licensed, some of them need a business plan, some of them need that training.
And one of them,
Man, I love Idaho.
is Brandon Timberlake.
I tell you, I feel like sometimes I was almost born in the wrong state.
He's the owner of Timberlake Cuisine. Brandon moved to Idaho from Las Vegas in 2020 to bet on himself and a better life, to be his own boss.
In my culture and my family, the most thing we were smiling and laughing over was food. No matter how bad things were, food was the thing that brought us together. And I've seen that. And that's something that I know I can recreate that for others, for all, you know.
Could this be your full-time job without IBCA?
Honestly, I'm not gonna say yes right now.
You're just doing what you need to do to make sure that your family survives. And so you've turned that into a business. And so we're just trying to be that resource to help them to get their business to that next level.
We all need support.
Also to help you to get to where to get out of that mindset so you can be the next person to help somebody else up. So I think that's pretty dope in itself.
Support works.
Yeah, and all kinds of support.
Support. It can be handed down too. That's the tradition behind Trish's family.
It's been so valuable for our community. So
And the backbone of her very own Black-owned business.
that same support, that same connection. I love it. I love everything about it.
Trish's business is called the Idaho Black Community Alliance, IBCA. She started that organization in 2021 because, as she said, she saw a need. She doesn't know exactly how many Black-owned businesses are in Idaho, but she says she works with around 200. And that story, Brian, is really cool how it kind of comes full circle in a sense that as a kid growing up in an area that was redlined, she didn't know that because she had a good family, a good structure, and it allowed her to be successful in her life. Well, she wants to pass that on to other people who maybe weren't afforded those same opportunities and that same luck that she had despite an otherwise difficult situation.
Perspective, for sure. Sometimes it's hard to see the forest for the trees, and getting outside of that and realizing, wait a second, there's a whole other set of rules and even allies out here that I had no idea existed.
Yeah, and when we talk with, Brandon specifically, like he has a story and he has needs to where his cuisine company, he wants to have like a building, a brick and mortar area. Well, he needs support to make that happen. People going to his business, supporting his business, things of that nature. And then you think about it, well, that's one of 200 stories, and that's just the ones that we know of.
That's pretty good.
So it's really interesting if you break it down of, I don't know, how many more are out there? How many more stories are we just maybe not privy to?
It starts with one, so I'm gonna look for Brandon's food truck out there.
Okay,
All right.
you should.
Thanks, Andrew.
A windy day for us today, especially this morning when our wind gusts were the strongest. We had a wind advisory that was in effect for most of the region through the Snake River Plain down through the Magic Valley. It's no longer in effect, but I wanted to talk about those wind headlines as we're just getting into the windy season. It never fails this time of year. I get a lot of questions. Does it feel windier than normal? This is a pretty average windy day for us. When we have a wind advisory that's issued, the National Weather Service in Boise is expecting wind gusts between 46 to 57 miles per hour. That, of course, equates to 50 knots. Now, a high wind warning would be issued when confidence is high in the forecast for gusts that get above 58 miles per hour. We actually did see wind at that strength through Twin Falls earlier today. When we have a high wind warning in place, that is in anticipation of widespread damage, power outages, reduced visibility that could cause travel concerns. For us today, again, wind advisory, mainly just a pretty typical windy day. Peak wind gusts for Boise made it up to 40 miles per hour, but as I mentioned before, Twin Falls made it up to nearly 60 mile per hour wind gusts for a peak wind gust today. That could cause some minor damage. Nothing reported so far. I did just check the Storm Prediction Center website just to see what it looked like there, but I hadn't seen any reports. So how much wind does it take to move an object laterally? Now, this is just the minimum wind speed that it would take. 3 miles per hour, barely a whisper of wind to move a maple leaf. There's your complicated equation there, but we'll just break it down. How about a big trash can? At least a 28 mile per hour wind gust. We had this strength of wind today. How about to move a person? Depends on the size of the person. We'll just call it an average human, 67 miles per hour or stronger. An average car, at least a 90 mile per hour wind gust. Again, both of those things, the person and the car, would be in that high wind warning criteria. Also, when you're talking about any wind speed that's above 74 miles per hour, that would be considered hurricane force. Just to show you the 7-day forecast, talking about wind today, continues to be windy through the next couple of days, a little bit less windy into Friday, and a stellar weekend for heading up to the slopes.
Good plan for this weekend. You know, mining, one of the world's oldest industries and what used to employ a lot of Americans across the country, including here in Idaho. But now some of these places where this was happening, they're just ghosts of these small mining towns that lay waste in rural areas all over the country. Cinnabar Mine is one of those ghost towns here in Idaho. The Cinnabar Mine and the quote-unquote town is located on a private patch in the Payette National Forest. It's 15 miles east of Yellow Pine in the heart of Idaho. And according to the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the mine is about 50 acres there. The town itself started around 1903. The mine started in 1921 for mercury mining operations, and it closed 65 years ago, 1958. And this week, viewer Scott Amos gives us a look at what the ghost town looks like now, today, under snow, obviously. You can still visit that historical site if you're willing to venture into that remote area and maybe put on some snowshoes. But that snow's deep there right now. Wow. All right, we're still waiting to see when this ESA bill is going to pop up in the Senate. But until then, we can talk about what you want to talk about with regards to that. So, Brian, parents can choose to send their kids to private schools. That's their choice. But our extremely non-fiscal legislature wants us to pay for it without any accountability. How stupid and disgusting. Quit wasting our tax dollars on crazy legislation, says Chuck in Boise. Public money must be for public schools. Legislators need to listen to their constituents, not to special interest groups, says B&B in Nampa. A free quality education for all is one of the hallmarks of this country, including the state. It's in our Constitution. Taking funds from public schools for any reason is bad, but to give it to private schools is especially onerous, says Jack in Boise. And that leads us to this one. With the legislature removing all the school districts' powers, they won't need the ESA voucher bill because, well, it won't be anything left, right, Scott? How does the state know children are being taught correctly if they don't know how many are homeschooled? Where's the oversight? Asked Larry. Well, they don't know. That's an estimate of about 11,000, but there could be much more. But that's the problem. Homeschooling in Idaho, there is no oversight. And this bill will not change that, which is a problem many people have with this bill, that there is no oversight for private schools or for homeschools. They would just get nearly $6,000 per kid to continue doing what they are doing. Brian, finally, a bill that is reasonable and well thought out. I can get behind the Clean Slate Act, says Katie. That one is a good one. A lot of people asking about, well, why not stop there? Or should even these misdemeanors be a problem anyway? Maybe we should take a look at the laws in that regard, some people have been saying, but maybe another day. We'll see you back here tomorrow.